Stay on.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Cut. I'm your host, Christian Williams, and I'm here, as always, with Randy Hall. Randy, how are you?
Doing good on this Sunday, Friday fix. We'll get it right one of these times, man.
This week.
Busy weekend. It was a really busy weekend for both of us. Next weekend doesn't really get better for me, but I can time it a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah. So we are doing a Friday Fix episode. It is obviously Sunday, but we did mention this in the show earlier in the week that we were going to do the Indianapolis Colts. So we are excited to do that tonight. This is your first Friday Fix. We go through everything that happened, state of the team wise, go through their current cap situation, some potential cuts, how free agency could shake out, and then also a 5-round mock draft. We are still in the 5-round phase, not quite to these 7-rounders just yet, but we're getting
get a few weeks.
Yeah,
gotta get to free agency first here.
Free agency is on the horizon, which is very exciting. New league year starts in less than 2 weeks now, I believe, March 1st. So
that's free agency. So.
Well, yeah, I think there's like a week of waiting before free agency starts, isn't it? I think it's that day.
Sick.
I'm ready. Time is a flat circle.
Yeah, I need to get to March. Trust me.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's get into it. So the Indianapolis Colts, they're a fun one to do because they're obviously one of these quarterback needy teams here at the top. We talked about the Bears last week on the Friday Fix, and they are not a quarterback needy team. So some of the conversation was about the trade. Today, we're going to take a couple different approaches to fixing the quarterback position, but state of the team wise, the Colts were they graded fairly well via Pro Football Focus, 74.1 overall, 65.5 on offense, 71.3 on defense. Their worst was their passing grade, and so obviously that comes into play with the quarterback upgrade that is very much so necessary. And the best was their coverage grade, which if you watch them, it makes sense. A lot of what happened last year doesn't matter at this point. Obviously, there's been some turnover, but it's worth noting that their negative 36.1% DVOA was the worst in the league. A lot of that was in the middle of tank mode with Jeff Saturday taking over middle of the year. Randy, what were your thoughts on the Colts this year? Do you think they went full tank? And do you think that's this was intentional?
I don't think they went full tank. I think the Jeff Saturday hire we all knew was not necessarily the best decision, but for what it accomplished to a certain extent, I think it did make sense to get this team back to focusing on the run game and try and keep the locker room intact. And I think that was Jeff Saturday's real goals for the last stretch of the year. We knew they weren't making the playoffs. We knew all that. But with injuries and all that and such bad quarterback play all throughout the year, it just did make sense to try and improve what you needed to improve so you could see what pieces on this offensive line for sure needed to be fixed and what needed to stay. I think we know what needs to stay per se, and we'll get into that. But I think the defense kind of overperformed for what we thought it would in certain aspects, especially on the secondary. I know an influx of Stephon Gilmore is going to make it so much better, but they played really well in the secondary, especially at the safety level, even with promising pieces like Nick Cross not really stepping up. So I do think that even with Shaq Leonard going down midway through the year, I do think they really just stepped up everywhere, and I'm excited in where they could go, but they do need so many fixes for the future, not necessarily this year.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. So Their current depth chart looks a lot different than what it's going to look like in a few weeks. So I don't want to spend too much time on it right now.
Yeah.
Matt Ryan is still on the roster. Nick Foles is still on the roster. Sam Ehlinger is still on the roster. We'll talk about those three players specifically. Their wide receiver core will be missing Paris Campbell unless they choose to re-sign him. So this is a good opportunity to flip over into their current cap situation. Randy, take it away.
Yeah, so they have 11.891 million. It is it is in the top half of the league. I know that, but I don't remember exactly where it ranks. So they are doing pretty well in cap, but they do have some very clear cut candidates. Matt Ryan, which we and Nick Foles being two of the big ones. Matt Ryan gives you 17.2 million free, and Nick Foles gives you 2.1. I think, new coach in here. I don't think either of these quarterbacks really fit the system, and it doesn't make any sense to keep either, in my opinion. And then Kenny Moore II, the slot corner, 7.6 million clean. No dead cap in that one. So that one is appealing, but this secondary, well, I did say it was, one of the strengths of this defense. It's really thin right now. So cutting a slot corner without being able to add a lot of depth, and you're not really going to get a big improvement for less money by any means. So it's a tough cut there. And then Ryan Kelly, 7.8 million, their center. Injuries this last year, but he really struggled. Worst season of his career by far. They've had backups play better in his injury stints. It does make sense to cut him, but again, it's the interior of their offensive line is really thin as well.
Yeah. Yeah, on the flip side, I didn't do it. So we both ended up saying that we would cut Ryan and Foles and just go with something different in the quarterback room here and then keep Kenny Moore and Ryan Kelly. Kenny Moore had a really rough season. Played in 12 games, but he was their second worst defender in terms of coverage grade per Pro Football Focus, and their worst cornerback. He struggled in coverage quite a bit this last year, and that was kind of evident on the film. On the other side of things, we have evidence that Kenny Moore can be a really good slot corner, and I think that some of the things that went down last year just played a role in that. I don't think they'll cut him because they really, like Randy said, they don't have a lot of depth behind him, at least at the slot position. Now, they do have assets. We're going to talk about that. But they don't have a ton of money to go get someone else in free agency. So keep him around, see if he bounces back, I think is the best way to move forward with that.
Yep. And I mean, the cheapest, better slot corner you're going to get is probably 8 or 9 million. So you're costing yourself money to cut him and get better, which makes sense, but to commit 9-10 million to slot corner with your depth chart is not the best team building option.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move over to free agency. Randy, do you want to go first this time?
They're free agents or what we did?
Because they're free agents. Yeah, they're free agents.
It's a decently long list. Their depth chart is pretty thin right now. Yannick Ngakoue, the biggest one of those. Matt Pryor, Brandon Facyson, Tyquan Lewis, Ashton Doolin, the other slot receiver, Rodney McLeod, Ben Banagu, never said that one out loud. Dennis Kelly, Paris Campbell, Armani Watts, Matt Hawk, Tony Brown, Chase McLaughlin, the kicker, Bobby Okereke. That's the Okay. I was like, dang, I'm so used to that one. I'm sorry.
I know.
And then Brian Cowart and EJ Speed. I always catch myself because I'm so used to saying it like that.
I know. We said it wrong for like 3 years.
It's McAfee's fault. And I think we're all fine with that.
I know. And then restricted free agents, Khalid Kareem and Dakota Shepley. So the Yannick Ngakoue thing, we'll get to what we ended up doing with him, but it's important to note, like the raw stats are really good. Like he ended up with 12 sacks. He had a ton of pressures, but on a snap to snap basis, he was super inconsistent. And he's going to command a good amount of money because of those sack numbers. And so with their lack of cap space, even after the cuts, like 31 million is what we end up with. And that's a pretty good number. But I think that there are better investments than to bring back Ngakoue, and I think Ngakoue is probably going to look for a fit that makes more sense now with the regime change and everything. That's the big one. Rodney McLeod is low key a big one as well. He had such a good year that I think he's going to command some money. Um, I know you didn't. You got to bring him back, and I chose not to because I think he'll get kind of priced out of what they're looking at. But overall, like those are the two like main free agents. Paris Campbell had a good year. I'm interested to see if they do bring him back. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think? I mean, I know neither of us brought back Paris, but do you think he's a good fit for what Shane Steichen's going to do?
I do think he is a good fit. The issue is we both used him as signings for the Bears
Yep.
last week, and we had very different values for Paris Campbell.
Yep.
I got him, I believe it was like a 1 year, like I want to say like $3 or $4 million deal. They can afford that, but you did like a 3 year, like $7 million a year. They
Yep.
can't really afford that and bring back other pieces and improve where they really need to. And the biggest thing, this is such a slot heavy draft that while they're not going to be as good as Paris Campbell year one, is it better to get two cheap options to try and bolster your wide receiver core or bring him back and force to be using him now because he's getting 6 or 7 million a year when your focus really should be on Pittman and Pierce?
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's kind of what I was going for as well. All right. So where'd you go in free agency? We started with 31 million, both of us. Hit us
I
with it.
went I went a little bit budget friendly options. I did sign 6 people. Uh, I brought back both. I'm messing up the first name now. Bobby Okereke, 2 years,
There you
six
go.
million. This is honestly, this is where his valuation is for like market value on multiple sites is about three. I think it was about 3 or 2.5, 2.75. I do think they're going to give him a little bit more. I know a lot of Colts fans don't think they're going to be able to pay like him and Shaq Leonard. I just don't think Okereke has done enough to get 8-10 million a year. I do think he might get a little bit more than this, but I don't think it's going to be a lot more.
Yeah.
And it might just be a 1 year deal to prove it as well to reset his market for next year. So Rodney McLeod, I brought back 1 year, 2.5 million. His valuation is really, I think it was like 1.5 ish. So I did bump him up because he did have such a good year. I do think there'll be some interest there, but I do think there's interest from himself bringing him back into this fold because they really do need him. Greg Dortch, I brought in 1 year, 1.5 million. I do think he's going back to the Cardinals, but they have such a weird wide receiver room right now. A really small Hollywood Brown, Rondell Moore, and then him, and then Hopkins as of now, but there's still talk of moving him. If you're moving him, I think that's pretty much guaranteeing Kyler Murray's out for a while in your eyes. And at that point, does he stay on the cheap? Because they also don't have the best cap room either until that deal's made. So I do think he looks for a different position elsewhere, and he would be their starting slot wide receiver day one and get a lot of involvement and be able to work inside and out the same way he was for the Cardinals with Pittman and Pierce both playing inside at different times.
Yep.
I also brought in DeAndre Carter, 1 year, 2 million. I do think he's had a little bit more show in his career, so I gave him a little bit more to leave the Chargers and just take a new shot somewhere else with a new quarterback. They have cap problems as well. There's talk of them cutting Khalil Mack. So this is basically trying to get cheap deals from the teams that are a little bit more in flexibility and capitalize on that. I brought in Nate Davis. That is my big spend. Guard, immediately you're starting right guard and kind of solidifies Ryan Kelly as your center a little bit more or whoever you want to start there. And while you are putting a lot of money in your offensive line at this point, then I do think 8 million a year is a pretty good steal for a guy that really can come in for the Titans, can help solidify the run game even more, which is what this team desperately needs with a rookie quarterback, which is spoiler alert, which we're both doing. And then a Landon Roberts, a middle linebacker, backup middle linebacker at that, 1 year, 2.5 million. Mainly, they just are very shallow linebacking core, even with bringing back Okereke. I think it's a total of 6 before I brought him in.
Yeah.
Before I brought in Landon Roberts, I brought in a 7th, and actually only backup at a linebacker. With injury history from Shaq Leonard, now for the last couple of years, I think it's a good idea to bring in someone you could trust in that kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love the way you approach this. I think going the budget friendly side is definitely going to help them continue to build in future years. Like that rollover cap that they're going to then have is going to be important. And I don't think that they will feel that they're win now, even though they do. They have a lot of pieces, right? Like we talked about, their secondary was phenomenal last year, and I'm just going to go ahead and lean right into my free agents because I'm a believer in make a strength stronger, and so I'm bringing in Jonathan Jones, the corner from New England, for 2 years, 16 million, so 8 million a year. Jones played well. He didn't have a ton of snaps in the slot. that was tough to say. But so Isaiah Rodgers played well for the Colts on the outside. I think if you bring in Jones to rotate in with Stephon Gilmore, Isaiah Rodgers, and then whoever else they may add, I think that you're looking at a very strong secondary. That's going to help Kenny Moore bounce back. And so make a strength stronger. That's what I attacked there. Bobby O'Kerr.
Quickly for that one, Jonathan Jones put a lot of slot snaps in previous years for the Patriots. Right. With their rebranded secondary this year and adding in more Joneses to make it more confusing, they did decide to play him on the outside so much more this year. He did excel. Not that he wasn't really good in the slot either, but I do think he showed that he could play both, and that's why I think it's a great signing because while Rodgers did play well at times, I think Jones would obviously be the starter and could rotate into nickel if you're not getting what you need from Kenny Moore during the start of the year. And it does give you flexibility to cut him to pay for Jonathan Jones after you've made that deal.
Yeah, that on top of the fact that Stephon Gilmore hasn't been a model of health over the last few years, and so just it's an insurance type of signing there. I also brought back Bobby O'Kerr, 3 years, 10 million, so a little bit more than Randy, but not a whole lot more. He played well. It's just you can't really pay linebackers a ton of money and be successful, and I don't think that they will do that. But I do think Okereke makes sense. I think he's comfortable in Indy. Instead of going with Yannick Ngakoue, I brought in Jadeveon Clowney. I think Clowney is very clearly done with Cleveland and will be looking for another opportunity on a potentially playoff bound team. And I think that he could look at the Colts as one of those teams just with how open the AFC South is. 1 year, 9 million. I think Clowney's going to get paid a little bit. He hasn't really been good. He's been fine. He just hasn't been elite ever really in his career, but he's a good rotation piece with Kwity Paye, with Dayo Odeyingbo, and Odeyingbo. And I think that kind of fits. And then my final signing, instead of going and getting Paris Campbell, I got a player that's pretty similar to him in McCole Hardman, 2 years, 17 million. I think they take a shot on getting a speed guy. I think Paris Campbell is obviously very fast. I think Paris Campbell is also ready for a change of scenery, and we used him for the Bears last week. So ideally, I would bring back Paris. McCole Hardman, I think, also needs a change of scenery. So I brought him in to be that, like, very much so a slot guy in the middle of Pittman and Alec Pierce.
Yeah, and I think this is more than the Chiefs can pay him as well. So that's a part of it. I also don't think Clowney's getting 9 million. Okay. I think you're safe in saying that he gets 9. I think if he's asking for 9 or 10, he's not going to get signed. He really hasn't produced. And you could say a lot of or all of his production in the last 2 years was just because of Clowney's pairing with Myles Garrett. So I think he's getting 4 million, 5 million, and kind of approve it and actually do it in a scenario now because he's really hasn't been productive ever. So, and really, because this is more of a strength to strength, like you've said you were doing, because they do have the big power edges. I think that is what this is here. So, I mean, I like what you did, obviously, but I think you will be able to save some money on Clowney from what you projected there. And I do think they are looking to add speed to the receiver room even more, and I do that a different way. But yeah,
So do I. So do I.
but overall, I spent 17 to 31 million. I'm also spoiler alert trading up, so it won't be 31 million. It'll be a little bit less. And Christian spent 29 and a half, and hopefully less with Clowney. Um, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think both. Obviously, you want bigger names and really more playoff push fixes
Yeah.
this year. Where I was like, well,
Stopgap.
let's fix the roster a bit and see what we have and
Sure.
roll over some cap for next year because they probably need it.
One thing I kind of regret, as I did this, I tried to figure out a way to get a guard in there because I don't really love the guard options in the draft, which is a little bit of a spoiler here. Um, and I do think they need some offensive line talent, specifically at the guard position, right guard. But that's why I like yours a little bit more because you got Nate Davis in there. So, um, okay, let's go over to our mock drafts. So, team needs, we've already kind of really talked about that. Quarterback is the number one, wide receiver boost in that room, edge, interior offensive line, offensive tackle, and then just depth everywhere else, but corner, safety, D tackle, and then I think they need another running back. I'd actually probably bump that up above like corner and safety. I'm not trusting Zach Moss to be RB2 personally.
That's fair. I'd argue Deion Jackson is more RB2, but
That's also fair. Yeah.
yeah, and specifically they need depth in the corner room, the safety room, the D tackle room, the wide receiver room, and a slot. If we both sign slots, but it's more apparent that I need it. They need a speed edge specifically because they have power edges and more run stoppers. They need right guard, center, interior offensive line, no matter what. Left tackle is what they need, and it's more competition with Bernard Raymond. Not
Yeah.
necessarily, you have to pick that, early, but you need to bring in someone that can really compete and push him farther. D tackle is just depth. Running back, like you said, pass catcher that can't run in between the tackles. But they do not have a pass catching running back,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Really quickly, on the Bernard Raymond front. So he started off fairly well, but in limited snaps. The first time he got on the field pretty extensively, terrible. And a terrible 5-week stretch, but he really ended the season very well in pass blocking. And so I think they'd probably go into it bringing in some level of competition for him and being comfortable that he'll win that job. I also could see a world in which they just say, all right, you're our starter. We'll address it if we can't bring in some competition too,
Yep.
All right, hit us with your draft, Mr.
All right,
Trade
so
Man.
I did trade up to the 101. I traded the 104, the 235, first next year and second next year for the 101 and the 103 in this year's draft. With the 101, I did do Bryce Young, quarterback from Alabama. Obviously, bring it in. Name escaping me, but the Eagles' offensive coordinator. You want to Steichen, thank you. You want to have a little bit of the option to use the legs, and I think Young gives you enough of that without having to rely on it. And that's what I think is going to be the biggest thing for this team to really focus and move forward, because you don't want to change the entire run scheme of this team. And that's what a pure running quarterback does necessarily. Now, a good coach can do both. I don't think that's proven yet necessarily. So I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. I want to rely on an arm with some upside. So I went with Bryce Young there.
Okay. I like it. I'm curious to see because when that hire happened, it was, oh, you can lock in Will Levis to the Colts. And then a day later I saw, well, you can lock in Bryce Young to the Colts. Or you can make an argument for all of them. Shane Steichen worked with Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. They're very different quarterbacks. And he succeeded with both of them. So I like this pick. I think you should run through your whole draft and then I'll come back with mine because they're wildly different.
All right. They are. Mainly because I got my next main pick. So now all the way at pick 79 in the third round, I went with Darius Rush, corner from South Carolina, more of a big body. So quickly, good in zone, good ball skills, and he's big. Man coverage not the best, so definitely not putting him in the slot anytime soon. Uh, Tackling not the best, but their secondary really didn't do that at all this last year. So I'm not really, or their cornerback room didn't do that. I should say,
Yeah.
And he's not, the most plus athlete off the top of my
Sure.
head, at least. So I do think he can contribute right away. I'm not sure he's necessarily a starter on this team. Again, I didn't bring in corner competition for this team, so this is the competition. Um, but I do think he can rotate in easily for you and not be a detriment to your team while he continues to grow, because he does need to figure out a couple more things to make up for not being, the top athlete. But in that room, I think you have the tools and the coaching to fix those things. And then getting a plus athlete, I went with Tyler Scott, wide receiver from Cincinnati, with the 103rd pick, so the pick they got from the Bears as well. Explosive, explosive, explosive. Really good separation skills early and late. Good tracking and ball adjustment. He's just small, and he drops the ball from time to time. And with the size, he's not the best strength player. So 5'11", 177. But he's, track athlete type speed, and he enables that everywhere. And he has a really good stop. He hasn't really fleshed it out all the way yet, but I think he could easily grow to be a wide receiver 2 of this team. And by the way, Alec Pierce, there's some semblance of familiarity there. I think he might be pushing for this, and I think it will go well.
Sure.
I do think he fits a little. He's the opposite of Dortch, where Dortch is going to get open for you quick. And this guy needs to work more on being consistent at that with his hands. So I do think it's a nice change of pace for you. Kind of like what the Browns try to do with Schwartz, but this is actually a good, talented player.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
106, so 3 picks later, Will McDonald, the 4th, the edge from Iowa State. There's kind of a mixed bag of kind of a tier list at this part, where there's just a chunk of edges. We talked about Zach Harrison last week, and one other one I can't remember off the top of my head, but I did avoid both of those to try and include more here. Will McDonald, speed edge. So what I went with and what I said they need, a pure attacking, really wins with speed more than anything else. He does not have a big pass rushing repertoire. He does not have a tool bag or anything like that. He does lack strength, and he's not the best in the run. But that's not why you're drafting him, because you're drafting him in the 4th round to be a pure speed rusher to rotate in with your bigger edges already. But he does have, a really good motor, good length at 6'4", 245. He fits kind of the big edge for them, but he has the speed that the other guys don't. So that's where I'm really liking him there for them. Round 5, pick 140. I went Jackson Kirkland, kind of a tackle. He's 6'7", like 310. So I obviously has tackle size, and not necessarily guard weight, but 310 pounds. You could easily play guard, but he has a lot of experience starting on both sides of the line. So I think he could easily play as your swing tackle day one, as well as push Raymond for that position and give you depth at guard. And that's the biggest thing. I don't think I'm not sure he'd ever be a starting guard for you. Obviously, with me signing a guard, that's out of the realm of possibilities, but he does have a really thin lower half. So I don't want to, push him inside without addressing that anchor first. So I think that might be a move down the road. But I do think he could easily not win the job at left tackle by any means, but he can give good work and make Raymond prove himself. And in worst case, he has to come in. I think you're confident in his play in the passing game. It's power rushers through his chest are going to be an issue, plain and simple. Finishing off 164, Kenny McIntosh, running back from Georgia, good size. I mean, just plain and simple, 4 more pass catching back, 6'1", 210. That's what you're going to want. So, the ideal kind of height, weight, speed guy for the running back position. One of the better pass catchers in the class. I don't know if I'd necessarily label him the best, especially with, utter freaking gods like Bijan and Gibbs. But I do think he has a chance to have like lead RB upside. So I think he could be your RB1 in a Jonathan Taylor injury scenario like we've seen the last 2 years.
Yep.
So I do think that can help, but he's obviously going to be able to rotate it to be a pass catcher day one and kind of refill that Hines role that you had, but actually be able to run through the tackles a lot better.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
pass pro, not good. So, yeah. And he does run a bit high, which is odd for his,
Yeah.
kind of play style. But I do think it does fit what you need day one. You can work on those other issues with elite backs, trying to help him with those small technique things in Jonathan Taylor in the room.
Yeah. His work between the tackles isn't like elite or anything like that.
No.
But he's a good running back. We comped him to David Johnson, like good David Johnson back, like play style, how he runs, how he can catch
Yeah.
passes, size. There are a lot of things that are similar. It's just David Johnson hitting was kind of like an outlier type of thing too,
Obviously, David Johnson was better than McIntosh, just because David Johnson was a stud
Right.
after he grew in the league. But David Johnson, that ceiling level, he has to grow a lot in his processing to read, because that's really what made David Johnson really good besides the pass catching, was to be able to play in more of his own concept and push through. So,
yeah, for sure. But good player is, and
yes.
with this running back class, like players like that are gonna fall to the fifth round. So it's entirely reasonable that we'll see names that we know here in the fifth, especially with the running backs. So, okay, I'll hop over to mine. I stood pat at 104. I think that there's a very real scenario in which they do say, okay, our guy is going to make it to us. And with 104, I took Anthony Richardson. Many people will say, there's no way Anthony Richardson's going in the first. He's going in the first. He's going in the top 20. And I feel fairly confident that he's going in the top 10. He also looks like it's tough for me to watch what Steichen just did with Jalen Hurts and see Anthony Richardson's physical tools. He's got a better bag of tools in terms of athleticism. But the accuracy that Jalen Hurts actually had coming out, that's not quite there with Richardson. Hurts was a bit older when he came out. So I just think that
Starter as well.
right. And I just think Richardson does fit the modern NFL quarterback and what Steichen was able to do with Hurts and what that offense was able to do because of Hurts. I think Richardson kind of fits that mold. Now, it's entirely possible that they don't want to do that. They want to get someone like Bryce who can really push the ball downfield, also offers some with his legs. Same thing with Will Levis. I don't really think CJ Stroud is going to be one of their targets. I just don't see that fit as much.
So if they're not concerned about the running aspect, Stroud is almost ideal for them. Size and in the
Right.
pocket processing. I mean, he's the best fit. But if they want any running aspect, which we know Stroud can do, he just doesn't want to, and he wants to more. If he's going to run, it's because that's the last option. So, I mean, I think he's on their board. I think the biggest thing for the stand pat. I think if you're staying pat, there's no okay, Bryce Young is clearly a lock to be a top 5 player in this draft, probably an all pro. And these guys are good upside guys. It's more like they're all kind of close. And you're like, well, I mean, I could work with any of them. So why mortgage the future when I think I could run my offense with any of them?
Right. Yeah,
and
for sure.
If you like Anthony Richardson, I think Will Levis and Bryce have the better chance to go 1, 2, respectively.
Yeah, for sure. Which is why I went Richardson instead of Levis when I, stood there. So I guess it's up to Colts fans here. So at 35, the pick that Randy had to give up to go get Bryce, I got Nolan Smith, the edge rusher from Georgia. Probably a top 15 talent in the class, but he's coming back from a torn pec. He's a senior, so he might get knocked for that. He's small for an edge rusher. That stuff does not matter, though, when you pop on his tape. He was once a top recruit. He's very, very strong. He can contribute in the run game, but he's a speed rusher with bend, and he's the things that the Colts don't currently have. while also still being strong in the run game. Like, he would be an immediate starter, I think, opposite Kwity Paye, assuming that he is fully healthy come this fall. So I got him at 35. 79, you still had that pick, but I ended up going with Marvin Mims, the wide receiver from Oklahoma. So I added McCole Hardman, but that's not really enough, I don't think. And so Marvin Mims, he brings a deep ball aspect to this offense where they do have it. Alec Pierce can do that for sure. McCole Hardman can certainly do that, but it's mostly been used on, stuff behind the line of scrimmage or short and things like that. Marvin Mims can really, really stretch the field. And if you're going and getting Anthony Richardson, the best way to take advantage of him is to let him throw his deep ball because it can be very, very good. He's got one of the strongest arms. He's got the strongest arm in the class. So Marvin Mims here at 79. 106, I took Ricky Stromberg, the center from Arkansas. We talked about how Ryan Kelly had a rough year. I think, getting a better backup plan for that is smart, and people aren't super high on the center class, so I don't think that we're going to get more than maybe 2 or 3 centers on day 1 and 2. And so Stromberg kind of falls into that next category of I think he's good. I think he's got good movement skills. I think that he can anchor fairly well. He's not the strongest. He doesn't get a ton of push, but he's a guy that I think they will like for the athleticism and the movement skills within this Steichen offense. 140, I went with Garrett Williams, the corner from Syracuse, who was once being mocked in the first round with how he was playing early in the year, suffered an ACL injury, kind of a scrawny kid, not the best athlete in the world either, pretty small. I think he's like 180-ish, and he's pretty lanky. But good player, good tape, fits into a zone scheme pretty well. So I think that they can use him in cover 3 concepts, cover 6 concepts, things like that, and just add to that rotation. Like I said, make a strength stronger. And then 164 in the 5th round, I took Travis Dye, running back from USC. I first of all, I really love Travis Dye's game. I love what he's able to do in both the passing game and his vision between the tackles. Travis Dye had easily his most productive year before he got injured down the stretch for USC. And when I was doing this, I was like, okay, who's going to be my Gainwell for the Steichen offense? Travis Dye fits that really, really well, and I actually think does a lot of things very, very similarly to Kenneth Gainwell. So you've got your one with Jonathan Taylor, you've got Travis Dye, who's much better pass catcher than Jonathan Taylor immediately, and offers that. That's kind of your Nyheim Hines, Kenneth Gainwell type of player there. So that'll do it for my draft here.
Yeah. Quick couple things. Clarified, because people do get confused. There's a difference between pass catcher and being able to catch a pass.
True.
Most people I know can go catch a pass.
Yeah, true.
But there's a difference between being a pass catching back and I think Dye would be the only running back in that room that really could fit that mold.
Yep.
I did kind of chuckle to myself because both Marvin Mims and Garrett Williams were players I was going to put in here, but I could not predict where they were going. Yeah. They're really, especially because I don't have like their grades fleshed out by any means at this point. There's just so much discourse of where they're going, and I just sit in there like, okay, well, I could take them both at 103 and 106, and then PFF is like, oh, you're reaching heavily on these guys. I'm like, what? I don't think I am, and then you having Mims at 79. I was like, see, like I feel like he's going around there, but like
he will. He's going to be a day 2 pick.
Yeah, but again, it's a weird mix of like slot outside guys in this class. It's so many slots, so it's going to be weird to see who steps up and gets more recognition. And that's why I went Scott, just because I think immediate talent wise he's lower, but he's got those special traits. I'm not quite sure how far he rises. But yeah, it was funny to see both those and hear your explanation. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. Damn it. I should have stuck with it.
Yeah, man. The Marvin Mims, the PFF hate is a little bit weird to me. I mean, the kid's been dominating since high school. Like if you look up I was looking up Texas football records. He's the leader in some of them. He holds state records, and he never really stopped producing. So, okay, give me your new team here, Randy.
All right, Bryce Young, JT, and Kenny McIntosh as your top two backs. Alec Pierce, left receiver. Michael Pittman Jr., right receiver, with DeAndre Carter backing him up. Greg Dortch as your starting slot with Tyler Scott trying to learn the process. Bernard Raymond as your starter still with Kirkland kind of rotating in there. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly still your starter. Nate Davis is your starting right guard now. Braden Smith is your starting right tackle, again with Jackson Kirkland kind of rotating over there. And Danny Pinter is your backup center. Mo Alley Cox, the tight ends didn't really change. Their depth chart is Cox, Granson, and Woods. I do think Woods is now the starter in my opinion, but I love that this is. Kwity Paye, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, and Daya Odedingbo as your starters, with Will McDonald being your predominantly just rush edge for the start of his career. Bobby Okereke back, Shaq Leonard, Zaire Franklin. Nothing really changing there except Landon Roberts being your backup. Stephon Gilmore, Isaiah Rogers, Darius Rush, Kenny Moore as your starting four corners. Julian Blackman and Rodney McLeod back as your starters. And Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas still rotating in. I do think Nick Cross will be their starting safety eventually. He just didn't show anything this last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the reason I was comfortable not bringing McLeod back is because I think he does take that next step. I had issues with Cross's tape, though, last year. I know he got drafted really high still, and the instincts weren't there. So sometimes that doesn't translate well when the instincts aren't there in the college level. But I didn't hold that against him. That's why I didn't bring in safety help. Okay, my updated team: Anthony Richardson is my starter, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Dye, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, McCole Hardman, and Marvin Mims as your slot receivers. And all of those guys can kind of rotate. I think Pittman does fine work out of the slot as well.
He does. His best tape I've seen is waiting medium to deep, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, his stuff in the intermediates is really good. I have the same starting offensive line with Ricky Stromberg now in backing up Ryan Kelly. The right guard position is a problem. I think that they would look at some other solution for that, but also you assume that Ryan Kelly gets better, Braden Smith has another good year, and it kind of masks the problem that is the right guard. If Ryan Kelly doesn't, then you have Ricky Stromberg as your backup plan there. Tight end, I agree. Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson, I think, are going to be more involved than Mo Alley Cox next year. Defensive end, Kwity Paye, rotating with the flurry of Dayota Yingmo, Nolan Smith, Jadeveon Clowney on the other side. I think all of them rotate. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner. I don't like the defensive tackle depth. I do wish I would have invested somewhere there.
However, Kwity Paye and Odedingbo both rotated in at D tackle different times, or at least pass rush downs, and Clowney can as well. So
that's
you
true.
can kind of mask it a bit, but I do think they would sign some depth piece.
Yeah, for sure. Bobby Okereke, Shaq Leonard, Zaire Franklin, no change there. Stephon Gilmore, Jonathan Jones, Garrett Williams, Isaiah Rogers, all rotating at corner. Kenny Moore as your slot corner as well, with obviously Jonathan Jones rotating in with him as well. Then Julian Blackman, Rodney Thomas, and Nick Cross as your three safeties. I think there's a chance that maybe you move Garrett Williams to safety because of his work in zone coverage, and I think he's a good enough tackler. It would just be a tough transition for a day 3 rookie coming off an injury. I don't think that might be a long-term play, or you just address that position next year. But
yeah, this is not my favorite safety class.
No,
it's top heavy, kind of like last one, but last one had like 3 like late first, early second guys, top 40, top 50 guys. Yeah. This one really doesn't. Maybe 2 in the top 50. Maybe.
Yeah. They do have I would say Brian Branch is the best safety of any of the safeties that we watched last year, personally.
Still Kyle Hamilton boy. So.
Oh, I forgot Kyle Hamilton existed.
Yeah.
That might not be true. I don't know. I need
I'm
to
all
look at
right
the
if you
grades.
put him over like Petrie and Brisker, but don't come after him. Don't go
I
after
forgot.
him.
I was thinking like freaking. What's the guy's name that's on the Bengals now? Dax, the kid from Michigan.
Hamilton.
Yeah. That's who I was thinking was safety one off the board. That's crazy. Okay. I like both of our fixes here. I don't love your wide receiver room, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's Dax Hill,
But
by
I
the
don't
way. I don't know why.
Hill. Yeah. I knew that wasn't right, but I
I
didn't.
say
I
him.
couldn't remember it. So uh,
Yeah, but I mean, my wide receiver room was still clearly, Pearson Pittman pretty much only as your top focuses. But I think like 3 shots of Dortch, Carter, and Scott to help. And you've invested so much of the tight end position, like that has to be a focal point. And coming with that Eagle scheme, and now actually being able to use 2 tight ends, which it really couldn't this last year, I think that is a possibility.
yeah. On the other side of things, I love Greg Dortch. I am excited to see where he goes. I don't think he's going to be a Cardinal personally. I just think
No,
there's too many changes happening there. And I saw a report today that there's a chance Kyler doesn't play a snap for Jonathan Gannon, which, I mean, he's not going to be back until November ish. So maybe they move on from him by then. I don't think they do, but
he's already kind of working out pretty hard, so you might be able to lean more to the 6 months.
yeah,
But
that's true. All right.
uh,
Any parting thoughts on the Colts here, Randy?
uh no, I like the head coaching hire. I think if you do the right things at quarterback and don't spend too much to get up to one, if that's your plan, I think you can really work it out. If you do sit back and you're taking Richardson, you it's almost like a catch where you don't want to spend a free agency then because you're not fully competing. I do think Richardson could learn on the fly, but 12 starts, he's not experienced. He does really need a year to figure this out. People are saying the same thing about Will Levis. He started a ton, and he's old. If he
Yeah.
needs a year to figure it out, he's not going to work. Just plain simple, guys.
Yeah.
I do think Levis can figure it out, especially with his legs, and that's why I think Richardson can play year one. And neither of us brought in competition really for that job either. So, which I do think, Bryce Young's obviously starting if you try it to one, but if you're bringing in Richardson, guy like Mariota, guy like Brissett, I do think it makes a lot of sense to not necessarily be the starter, but to be a high value backup and a leader for Richardson to develop.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that will do it for our Friday fix on Sunday of the Indianapolis Colts. We went live when The Last of Us went live, by the way. So shout out to the people that are watching because Last of Us is fantastic. We don't have Marvel Talk on here anymore.
Haven't watched the episode.
It's good, dude. It made me cry twice. I've cried twice watching that show, and I thought it was like a zombie show, which it is, kind of. Marvel Talk will be back eventually. Hopefully, Randy goes to see Quantumania soon.
No guarantees on that day as of yet. So
Yeah. My non-spoiler thoughts. It was fine. It was good. It was 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite film. It wasn't bad. There were things I hated. There were things that were really cool. And I don't know how I feel about Marvel at this moment. Because we'll have more thoughts with the spoilers. I don't want to spoil everything.
First movie of the phase.
First movie of the phase. This is true, which is why I set my expectations a little bit higher, I think. Which
ballsy.
they kind of met my expectations a bit. We'll talk about it once you see it.
We will. Yes.
And we'll talk about it on here at some point. This week, we talked about doing a rookie mock draft. I don't know which day. It won't be tomorrow. I do know that. And it won't be Wednesday. I do know that. So probably Tuesday or Thursday.
We'll confirm.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But we will be back. I think we're either going to do a rookie mock or a different position. We're not going to hit the running backs yet, I don't think, because
no, I think. I mean, if we don't have 15. I know you have 15, but if I don't have 15 that I for sure like my grades on, like I don't think it's worth talking about yet.
Fair.
So I'd rather just play it off for the longest time because there's just so much depth that you
Yeah.
really need to flesh it out. I know we won't do, in depth in all 15, but I think giving at least a tier of the depth is a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll be back later this week now that it is Sunday. Randy, do you have anything to add before we bounce out of here?
Oh, let's go.
All right. For Randy Hall, I'm Christian Williams. We'll talk to you guys later this week. Later.